The mantle here is complete, as you know, if you follow along, but at the same time, it's not complete. The install is complete, but what are we gonna do about all of these holes? Well, this is a perfect time to show you guys how I fill nail holes. I'll show you some of the products I like to use, some that I don't like to use, and by the end of this video, you'll have the information to eliminate these nail holes. These are from 15 gauge nailer, 18 gauge nailer, pin nailer, trim head screws, spring clamps, just dents throughout the installation process that happen to millwork. You're gonna have them whether it's paint grade or stain grade. So how do you get rid of these holes? I'm gonna show you, let's get into it. Now, like anything, having the right product is gonna make a tremendous impact on your final results after paint. So we are going to walk through some of these. This isn't every wood filler on the market, but it's a pretty broad range to cover the characteristics of pretty much every wood filler on the market. Let's start on the left here with these. I'd put these two in the same category. These are spacklings. These are not even made for wood fillers, but people do use them on woodwork and MDF. I've used them on both. And I do not recommend these. They are just too soft, they're lightweight, and even though they say they do not shrink, they tend to shrink and you end up seeing nail holes after the paint, which is definitely not something you want. We want to hide these nail holes and make them where they are invisible. So stay away from these pretty much at all costs. I used to use a lot of this back in the day and no longer do. So next, moving up to an actual wood filler, another DAP product. This is plastic wood, not the best wood filler, claims that it's stainable. That's to be debated. I've not had great results with that. So this one is in the natural finish. Definitely paintable. I mean, pretty much every filler is going to be paint grade, but it is very hard. I will give it that, and it can be troweled and molded. It looks and acts like real wood, as it says. It is very good, but it's not the best. So if you're gonna grab one of these at the big box store, which is where you'll really get these two products, three products really here, I would lean towards this plastic wood. But let's continue. So here we have some Bondo products. This is glazing and spot putty, and you can see there it says for pinhole scratches and minor dings. This is something that I would not use on my initial go around of filling in nail holes. I would use this for what it says, for pinhole scratches and minor dings. So I see a lot of professional painters using this. You'll notice because it's red. If you ever walked into a job site and just seen red dots all over all the millwork, you know they're using Bondo glazing putty, and they're usually doing that after the first coat of primer, looking at things that they missed on the initial fill. So don't use this for filling in nail holes. It's not good, it shrinks, and it's gonna drive you crazy. So next up, we have actual Bondo. If you know anything about Bondo, you know there's the actual Bondo in this quart, and then on top here, you can see that little container inside there, that is the hardener. So you mix the Bondo with the hardener, and then you have like a minute to work with it. So it's very inconvenient when you're going around filling nail holes on a project. You would have to be mixing this up like every 2 or 3 minutes, and it's very, very uncalled for filling nail holes. We use this mostly for repairs, and if a molding is chipped away in a large section, you can use this to shape it back out and recreate that molding. But it's not something that I'd recommend for what we're trying to accomplish for just filling basic nail holes. So Bondo does have its place, and it is not for filling in nail holes. So that brings us to our last filler that we have here. And this one right now is my favorite wood filler. This is called Famo wood, and they come in different finishes, different sizes, obviously, as you can see here. And these right here are the best wood fillers that I've ever used, and they are extremely hard. They dry within 10 to 15 minutes depending on the size of the filling that you're putting in. If it's a big screw hole, it might take a little bit longer, but generally that 10 to 15 minute range it's gonna be completely dry and very hard. So it'll be ready to sand down in that time frame. So this is the product that I highly recommend. I get this at my local lumber yard. I'm sure if it's on Amazon, I'll put a link down in the description. But this has been my go-to lately, so that's what we're gonna use to fill in these nail holes. When you open this container, you're gonna find that the filler is extremely wet. and it's kind of crazy because how hard it dries in such a short amount of time. But that's amazing because you pull it out and you can work with it and mold it and do anything you want with it. And I just use my fingers. I don't put on a glove or use a Bondo spreader or anything. And once I have it loaded up on my fingers, I'll just grab, you know, an amount about like that. I'm just gonna go across every nail hole that I see in every ding, and I'm gonna push it into the hole. So I'm gonna initially push it in. I've got a little clamp mark right there. Push it in. And pushing it in, make sure that you're feeling the hole in. Because what you don't want to happen is that you just put it on the surface like that, and then when you go time to sand it off, well, now your hole is revealed. Or the sander, if you're using something like a surf prep sander, the vibration of that machine or any machine could shake out the filler because it's not touching the entire hole. So just make sure you push it in all the way and get it pressed in there. That's the main thing you want to emphasize. So get it pressed in there, do an initial round of pressing it in there, looking for all holes. So now that we have everything pushed into the initial holes, I'm just going to go back and put a pretty good amount of excess right on top of the hole, centered on the hole. Now the reason for this is that whenever we sand it down, whatever we use, sanding it by hand or an actual machine, it is going to be able to knock it down flush to the surface of the material. In this case, this crown molding and this fascia piece. So, missed that hole there. It's kind of hard to see with the camera in the way. Is that a hole back there? It might be. Push that in. And really, we want to see excess filler on every hole. So we've got this section filled in. We'll start the clock right now. In 15 minutes from now, all this should be extremely hard and ready to sand. Missed a little bit right here too. And up there. Now that I'm behind the camera, I can see it. So that looks pretty good. So that's what I like to see right there. Like, that's heavy excess right there. But again, this is going to pay off when you sand it down. If you just put it on lightly, I mean, I've experienced it, you're going to see the hole. The whole point is not to see the hole. There's another little ding right there. So really got to come in with laser eyes and just look for every little ding and imperfection, and you're going to be filling those in. So that is filling the nail holes right there. So let's look at another defect right there. This is a ding or a dent. And this could be from anything. This could have came from the supplier, from the lumber yard, from me strapping it to my truck. I don't know where that came from. Could have just got hit by something when I was spinning it around at the saw. I don't know, but the fact that I do know, it got dented somewhere and I need to fill it in. So for something like that, that's a minor ding. I will just try to kind of float that out like that, where I'm just gonna leave it heavy. And just glide across it like that. It can be even that heavy. There's a little bit of a ding right there too. But I'm happy with that. Once that dries, I'll be able to sand that down flush and you won't see it. And it looks like this might have got dinged after the fact because there's another ding on this separate molding that's in the general location of that one. But there's no telling how it really got there. So those minor dings, you don't really have to push into it like you do on the nail holes and the screw holes. You just really need to kind of glaze over it. So that will dry. That's an extreme amount of excess, but it doesn't really matter because I'm happy with the smoothness of how that looks. Once I sand this down and make it flush, it will be like it wasn't even there. There's some minor other things, but that covers like 90% of what I'm running into here at least. So with that, we've got a lot of holes to fill here. I'll just run a time lapse showing me fill these holes, and with editing magic, we'll catch up when it's time to sand. So here's what we're looking like after that session of filling holes. And some of these areas you'll notice have more than others. Like this area here doesn't have much on the left side of the pediment, and the center pediment doesn't have much of anything. That's because this isn't the first session of filling for some of this project. I did fill in and prime a lot of this as I built it, if you remember. So let's go back down here. All this stuff was newly filled, as you saw at the beginning of the video, and I'll show you what we'll do with it now. So at this point, I'm gonna take me a piece of sandpaper here. It's a small roll of 120 is what I like to start with. I won't really go any lower than that. 120 is enough to knock down this filler. And you'll notice here, this has been an hour, so this is plenty of time. This stuff is rock hard now. That's all extremely cured and ready to be sanded. I have a surf prep sander, but I'm not gonna use that on the initial knockdown, because if you know about surf prep, I can sand this profile, yes, with a machine, but it's gonna take forever to get that knocked down. And if I use a low grit on my sander, then I'm gonna knock down all these edges and sharp lines that I wanna keep. I'd rather just do this by hand. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. It's a really good wood filler. So leaving that excess on and sanding it off allows us to have a perfectly flush surface here. So I'm good with that. I'm just knocking off the high points and the majority of the excess. I'm not gonna go too crazy because I will come back with my sander and fine tune it. After that initial sanding by hand with 120, you can see the nail holes still, yes. You can see the different color of where the hole was, but you can also see that that hole is now flush with the surface of the material. So this is where that sander comes in to clean up the excess and really just flatten everything to make it perfect. It's a real light grit that I have here. Actually, they don't even label it as a grit. It's like a fine pad, you can see here, and then this is gonna hug around that profile and really get into everything. So that's extremely smooth right there. And if I shoot that with some primer, we should be able to see all of those holes just disappear. I did miss a little ding right here, and that's the thing about this. This isn't, you're not gonna do this in one try. You're gonna fill stuff, prime it, you're gonna see what you missed, then you're gonna go back, or in some cases you don't even need to prime it to see what you missed. But that's why as you're filling, you need to be really focused, looking at everything to make sure that these things are not gonna show up in your final top coat finish. So I'm not gonna do that right now. This isn't the final primer or anything. I'm not gonna fill that in. So we're just gonna prime this section and see how we did. So I'm gonna prime it as I do on this with a rattle can of primer. And I've got stuff just lightly plasticed off because I don't wanna prime over unsanded filler. That would be a nightmare. So let's look at our first go around here. So I'm gonna let that dry and then prime it again. If you prime too heavy with these coats, they will just drip immediately. So I usually give it like a minute or two to cure. After that second coat of primer, here's what we're looking like. Looks pretty dang solid for a first go around on this section of the mantle. We might see some imperfection, but that looks pretty good. And then building coats with primer is another way to kind of make the surface more uniform. So I'll usually shoot 2 coats of primer, 1 reveal coat, which I would call this one. This will show me any imperfections that I can fill again, and then 1 final priming coat. and then we move on to finishing paint work. So yeah, I'm just trying to get it in the light so you can see what's going on here. Maybe a couple little imperfections, but that looks pretty good from where we started. You remember this thing was shot and clamped and had little pinholes in it. So for a first go around, I'm pleased with that. So that's one section. It's going to be the exact same process for the rest of this. And it's going to be a pretty long process. Look at what we're up against. So hopefully that helps you guys on filling nail holes. That's my process. Let me know if you have any other tips and tricks down below. But that's the result we're getting. I think that will work for you guys as well. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch up with you when it's time to paint this thing.